How y'all doing today?
Good.
I'm Shaheem Williams. I'm an English professor at Morehouse Park Atlanta, as well as the Art Museum's Digital Humanities Manager at Park Atlanta University, as well as the book influencer. You can follow me on TikTok and Instagram at Conjuring Literacy. And I have with me two of the Voodoo Knots founders. If you don't know what the Voodoo Knots is, it's a creative writing fellowship for Black speculative writers across the diaspora. Yvette and H.D. Yvette is the author of from Graveyard Wells, and he was the author of Futureland. And we're going to start off with some readings from the book before we get into just some conversations. I have some questions, and if y'all have any questions, feel free to ask them as well. You can just raise your hand. So you can start off by introducing yourself, Yvette, and then you want to go ladies first.
Yeah, sure.
Introducing yourself, and then you start your reading.
Thank you so much for coming. I will be reading from Drinking from Graveyard Wells, and this story, Home Became a Thing with Thorns, explores the surreal experience of being an immigrant. And in this story, I use the word kwere kwere, which is the slur for foreigner that's used in South Africa. So a lot of my work explores Afrosurrealism, the surreal experience of being a Black person in this world in general. So in this world, immigrants have to give up something that they love in order to naturalize as a citizen. So home became a thing with thorns. They take Jabu's eyes on a Tuesday morning. The snowflakes fall with an obscene tenderness outside. We're inside a sterile government building that looks like a cross between a DMV and a church. The building seems to be designed to keep any warmth out, lest the kwere-kweres inside get comfortable. It is the kind of cold that takes hold of your bones and refuses to let go. My friend Jabu is a painter. With a stroke of a brush, he can put rainbows to shame. He likes to paint our homeland, the beautiful blue sky we left behind when home became a thing with thorns. The naturalization priest lays a hand over Jabu's eyes, and just like that, Jabu's beautiful brown eyes vanish as if they've never existed. The spot where his eyes used to be is as smooth as an arm. Jabu collapses to the ground and retches on all fours into a plastic bin. Jabu isn't the first to vomit during a naturalization ceremony, so the priests always have those little plastic bins stationed at every corner of the building. The naturalization priest's face sours like it might if he spotted a fat rat scurrying into his kitchen. Jabu retches until there's nothing left to come out of him anymore. He dry leaves and wails for the rest of the ceremony. He can't even cry. They trick his eyes. One never knows what the naturalization ceremony, what the naturalization priests are going to take from a kwere-kwere. The only thing that we do know is that they will take something that you love. I remember my conversation with Jabu before the naturalization ceremony. I won't be a kwere-kwere anymore, he'd say, his eyes lighting up at the prospect of his dreams coming together like pieces of a puzzle to exist in life. When I'm a citizen, I will take shifts at the power plant during the day and then paint at night. I'll save up to open up my own gallery, you'll see. I can't wait to brag to everybody that I have a friend with a gallery, I say. I watch Jabu on the floor now. The wretched of the earth are not meant to make art. We're supposed to be too busy surviving. The corners of the priest's mouth twitch upwards in delight at the humiliation. Another kwere-kwere showed his place. Even though I too want to slump to the ground, I move towards Jabu and help him up. Come on, Jabu, I say, stop it. I know it's cruel, but I have to be the stronger one. I can't let Jabu end up like Asha. God forbid he ends up like Asha. You're a citizen now, I remind him, giving him a squeeze. Forget your eyes. They were a small price to pay. They took, he whimpers, still unable to fully comprehend what happened. My eyes. You can find other ways to make art, Jabu, I say, pulling his hair back so he can retch some more. Others have it worse, please. I don't want you to end up like Asha was our friend. While we all picked up the new language and tried to iron out our accents and pressing the wrinkles on clothing, Asha refused to learn the new tongue. It was her form of resistance. This place would take from us anyways, Asha said. Why not hold on to something? Then the naturalization priest took her language. No longer could she sing still as she wished in the Dembo songs that reminded us of home before everything was lost. She didn't eat for a month after she got her citizenship. We found her hanging from the ceiling on a Sunday night. It could be worse, I say again, trying to convince myself more than him. The naturalization priests don't only take body parts and voices, they can take away joy, names, love. beauty, songs, laughter, family recipes, music, and so much more. I shudder to think about it, but that is the price of citizenship. I take Jabu home to the 2-bedroom apartment we share with 4 other critters. Buy him a cane and make inquiries into getting him a service dog. I'll do everything in my power to ensure he lands on his feet. Our roommates know the weight of the taking. They've seen it countless of times. They saw it with Asha. So they allow Jabu to have one of the rooms by himself tonight. Jabu doesn't speak. When I sing Chilada Mwana Wangu, a lullaby my gogo used to sing to me, whenever I was restless, he keens until I can't bear to hear it anymore. Perhaps if Asha were here, she would have done a better job of soothing him with song. Before I bolt out of his room, he asked me his voice or hoarse rasp of what he once was. What do you think they'll take from you? This question haunts me. My naturalization ceremony is in a week. If I don't go through with the ceremony, they will send me back to the homeland. I've worked so hard just to stay here, for that to be my end. Whatever the priests take from me, I will just have to live with it. I will sacrifice anything to stay here. Protests rage in the city. People carry placards denouncing the naturalization priests. On TV, a local man with a sneer on his face shouts, "If it's so bad here, then go back to where you're from." I ignore the arrogance of one who's never known what it means to have a graveyard for a home. It is the arrogance of a man with solid earth beneath his feet. And I know that the ground we stand on is quicksand pretending to be solid. During the week, I try to forget about what's coming. I work under the table as a burner at the power plant that powers the city, hurrying work that no one else wants. The power plant has 5 chimneys like a coal plant. The chimneys are smoky eyesores that tower over the city. On my first day at work, I discovered it isn't coal that fuels the city. In the morning, a storage truck drops off large containers from the previous week's naturalization ceremonies. Each of the containers is labeled with a date. We unload the containers and burn whatever we find inside. My mind wanders during the burning as I toss limbs, recipes, tongues, songs, and marriage certificates into a giant furnace. The furnace burps and farts out smoke whenever I feed it something new. The furnace heat is not comforting. When I burn, I think of butterflies. The monarch butterfly is native to this land. It cannot survive cold winters. I read somewhere that it can travel as far as 3,000 miles to escape its death. The butterfly has no borders in its way, no papers to produce and no tolls to pay to stay where it is warm. The butterfly's flight is a beautiful thing, nature itself. Why is my flight from the winter of my life filled with shame? When I come across a container with the date of Jabu's naturalization, I am jolted out of my daydream. My hand shakes when I open the lid to find a pair of eyes sitting on a heap of other losses. Jabu's eyes. I reach for the eyes to burn them, but cannot shake off the unease, cannot ignore the churning in my stomach. What would Asha do? A voice inside me screams. Asha wouldn't burn her friend's eyes. Asha would throw a middle finger up and march out of the plant. But Asha is gone, a pragmatic voice in my head cautions me. Don't be stupid. I quickly glance at the other burners and the security camera before slipping the eyes into my pocket. I immediately take my timed bathroom break. In the toilet, I stash the eyes in my bra. Women in the old homeland would keep their coin purses in their bras to avoid pickpockets. No one ever thinks to search there. My heart hammers in my chest throughout the rest of my shift. I will stop there.
Yeah. All right. Well, I guess it's on me now. Read after this really work. How y'all doing? Is anybody here from Atlanta? Couple folks. All right. Where y'all from? Oh yeah, for sure.
I live in Cabbagetown.
Yeah. Okay. I love that neighborhood. Well, I'm Hugh from Atlanta as well. Bounced around a little bit. Was kind of like now Cumberland, Smyrna, but like back a long time ago, to Adamsville, to East Atlanta. I guess if you're telling other people who I am, you can say H.D. Hunter, but y'all can call me Hugh. I write exclusively kid lit, so all of my books are either for middle grade students or high school age students, and I write across the spectrum of genres. But today we have Futureland, which is the first, Battle for the Park, which is the first in a trilogy of middle grade science fiction-y type of stories. It's about this kid in the middle. His name is Cameron Walker. And Cameron is the son of the world's foremost engineers, and they have created a theme park. But the theme park is not like your regular theme park. Y'all like theme parks? Has anybody been to Disney World? Okay. It was like expensive to get there, right? Then you had to stay there. You're not coming back from Disney World on the same day. Futureland will come to you. It flies around the world and it stops in a new city every 3 months so that kids all over the entire globe can get a chance to experience it. Now, if you have a park that you're moving every 90 days or so, it's gonna be hard to find employees. So parents had this genius thought, what if we create these robots that can work all of the basic jobs in the park? Serve the food, operate the rides, make sure guests get to where they're gonna get to. And this is 2048, 2049, so that kind of thing is possible. Cam and his parents come to Atlanta for the first time since he was born. They said, we're gonna bring the park here, and we're gonna do something a little different. Instead of you being homeschooled by your robot teacher, you're gonna go to real school, real kids, and start to make friends of your own. Cam was a little nervous about it. You ever been to who's been a new kid before? Yeah, it's not the most fun. So he's a little nervous about it, but he does look at it as an opportunity to meet some friends. But as luck would have it, they land in Atlanta, they open the park, and the tech starts glitching. And then on the opening night where visitors come into the park, there's a local Atlanta kid who goes missing. And it gets linked back to Futureland. So Cam and his public school friends form like a little investigation team. And it's their job to solve the mystery of why the tech is glitching, where kids are disappearing to. And this book takes us through this mystery in Atlanta. The next one, which is out this coming November, takes us through a separate but related mystery in New York City. So that's a little bit about me, a little bit about Cam. I'm going to read to you a section that's a little bit into the book. And this section is basically the new exhibit that Cam's parents have created just for Atlanta. So it's a big deal that they're coming back. And now they've created this exhibit that hasn't existed in the park before. It's something that they're advertising as you can come and live out your wildest dream. And Cam is the first person to test it. He's the first person to go in and see what it's like before it opens to the public. Chapter 5, A Bright Future. I took one last look at Mom, Dad, and Uncle Trey. Dad smiled and waved, while Uncle Trey and Mom launched into another argument about the revs. Those are robots. I left them behind and stepped forward. A door started to appear, line by line. First, an outline of a bright silver rectangle, then an intricate pattern inside it, almost like a palace door for some faraway kingdom. Finally, a golden doorknob presented itself. Awesome. My body tingled as I stepped inside. I glanced back, but the door had disappeared. Here we go. Welcome to the Obsidian Imaginarium, a place where big imaginations turn into bright futures. A rev voice boomed all around me. Your destiny awaits. The building spun around, casting shadows across the walls. A path twisted left and right, cutting through more and more hallways. Neon arrows led me to an octagonal room with a pool in the middle of it. Black water rippled. Uncle Trey's plants ringed the walls, swaying side to side in unison. The future of tomorrow is only the dream of today, a red voice chimed. A platinum column rose out of the water, slowly twisting. The phrase, "the dream is the truth," glowed, just above the surface of the black liquid. Please proceed to your left. The future begins by placing your feet on the sensors in front of the elevators. I leaped on the footpaths, and the light above the elevator turned from blue to green. The door opened and I stepped inside. Enjoy your dream, the red voice said before the elevator doors closed. A holographic face appeared of a girl about my age with brown skin, coily hair tied up in a bun. She smiled excitedly, and her irises flashed neon orange. What is your name? Cameron. Good evening, Cameron. I'm Issa. Please relax. Take 3 deep breaths, initiating brain and body scan. The lights dimmed and a soft whirring began. The the elevator ceiling glow, a neon lavender halo spread over my arms and legs. It reminded me of when I went to the future care clinic for my checkups. It always started with this kind of scan. I used to be scared when I was little. I'd have to remember to remind mom and dad that some kids might be afraid of the light at first. Maybe guess would get a preview beforehand. My whole body tingled. You know how the inside of your mouth feels when you eat a peppermint? Tingling, weird, calming, but calming in, a weird way. The dream laser will help you decipher your greatest desire, Pizza said. I waved my hand through the cylinder of light. Please close your eyes, camera, and imagine your wildest dream. The future is made from dreams. Whatever we think can become reality. I bit my bottom lip. My wildest dream. Yes, Pizza replied. The thing that you want the most for your life. The thing you want most to be true. What do you wish to be? I closed my eyes to really focus. There was something, but no way. I couldn't think about that. I smothered my thoughts by wondering what my new friends would dream of if they were here. Yusuf, probably a basketball player. Would Rich want to be a comedian? Angel? Earl? Dreams have a way of rising to the surface when we get quiet, Pizza said. I had a dream I'd always been afraid to say out loud. Sometimes I wondered how different my life would be if I was a regular kid with a regular family and a regular house. Maybe then I could actually be... Has your dream revealed itself to you? Pizza asked, a smile in her voice. The words got all jammed up in my throat. My pulse raced. I couldn't say it. That didn't mean it was real. Like, real. My parents would be so upset if they really knew I didn't want the Walker legacy. That I didn't want to be the next Walker genius, flying Futureland from city to city, fixing revs and making storylines all day. I mean, I loved it, most of the time. But Futureland was their dream, and I had mine. Let the dream blossom in your mind. Don't fight it, Issa said. The whirring stopped. The lasers disappeared. The lights turned back on. A tiny jolt brought the elevator to its destination. Detective Walker, Issa said. Huh? My heart froze. At first I thought maybe it was another rev malfunction. Detective Cameron Walker. She smiled at me and winked. Her face still pixelated on the interior of the elevator door. Yes. Please get dressed. You'll need the appropriate attire for what comes next. It's going to be a big day. Your neighborhood needs you. The elevator walls on both sides will be open. Metal arms extended with clothes. One side, black pants, a white shirt, suspenders, and a top. The other side, a brown trench coat, dark sunglasses, and a checkered deerstalker hat. How did you know? And how did you know my size? We gained your precise measurements from your dream laser body scan, she said, fading away as I swapped my maintenance suit for my new detective outfit. Issa reappeared as soon as I was dressed. She looked at me and smiled. Looking sharp, detective. The elevator's back door opened and I stepped into a stark white room. I put on the sunglasses that came with my new outfit. Good luck, detective, Issa said as the doors closed. And remember to relax and let the truth come to you. The doors closed behind me. So we moved from this scene with Cameron into what we call a comic panel, which if you've ever read a graphic novel, it's pretty much all comic panels, right? It's like a long comic book. Futureland is a cross between a regular novel and a graphic novel. There are about 8 or 9 scenes within chapters for every Futureland book that we've illustrated in this way. Because it's cool and it's kind of fun to have a little break while you're reading, but also because a lot of what I write is for young black boys, but kids in general, who maybe don't know that they like to read yet, who maybe need something a little bit different to grab their attention and to keep them engaged. So this panel is basically Cam. He's in his detective office, which has like materialized in a simulated environment now that he's inside the exhibit. It says, wow, it looks like a real old school detective office. And then he gets a knock at the door. And somebody calls, hello, is the private eye in? He says, huh? She says, private eye, Cameron J. Walker. That's you, right? She's wiping some tears. He says, yeah, I guess it is. They sit down, and she tells him that she has lost her brother, and she can't find him. He says, I'm sorry, where was the last place you saw him? She says, I can show you if you come with me. And then in a very determined way, Cam says, let's go. So this isn't the end of the chapter, but I think it's a good stopping point, and I appreciate y'all listening.
the title of our talk is Afro-speculation, so I have to actually define what Afro-speculation or what Black speculative fiction is. Black speculative fiction is an umbrella term for Black authored sci-fi, horror, alternate history, and fantasy. And there's across genres and subgenres that have a pretty much a limited list that I'm not even going to try to be exhaustive of. Across genres and subgenres that have a pretty much a limited list that I'm not even going to try to be exhaustive of. But both of your work, for me, is cross-genre. So what do you feel about your work? Where does it fit within this speculative space? And how do you define Afro-speculative or Afro-surrealism and Afrofuturism?
Yeah, Afrosurrealism for me is about telling the narrative of the contemporary Black experience and using absurdity, horror, surrealism to explore that. So Jordan Peele's Get Out would be a perfect example of that, as well as Bruce Riley's Sorry to Bother You. And Bruce Riley actually has a new show on Prime, I think it's on Prime Video, and it's about this 13-foot Black boy in Oakland. He's a giant, and it explores like gentrification, policing, superhero culture. So that's kind of like what I do. I explore being African, being an African woman, so using horror and surrealism to explore the everyday, basically.
Yeah, I would definitely agree about the things that we see happen around us in like our contemporary world, and just that like kind of creeping feeling that there's something odd about this lived experience. As a Black person here, I don't know that I can do a better definition than you did, so I won't even try, but there's a lot of things that make me think about where the line is, if it exists, between like Black nonfiction and Black Afro-surrealism, because it just seems so close sometimes. I have a story that's based on an event of domestic terrorism where an entire Black town was burned down, and like what happens in the aftermath of that, and it like sounds surreal, probably feels surreal for that to be a part of your legacy, but this is history. It's like a fact, and so that particular genre is really interesting to me. A lot of my work for older kids will fall more squarely into Afro-surrealism, because I think that sometimes the topics within that category that I want to explore are just like they have a little more gravity to them.
I'm not going to assume that the part that you read is your favorite part of your book. So, what is your favorite part of your book?
That's such a good question. I think it changes, but right now it's the title story, the last story, Drinking from Graveyard Wells. And that story explores cosmic gentrification. So one day in this neighborhood, the house was here. So there's this neighborhood gossip who's trying to figure out where did that house go, where did those people go, and who's next. And every day a new house disappears, and we don't know, what's the force that's taking it. And I really love that story because the central figure is this neighborhood gossip, and she's like a busybody auntie who sometimes makes things worse. That while she's trying to solve the mystery, she kind of makes things worse. So, and I have deep empathy for that figure, and I think busybody aunties are central. There's like the matriarch, the busybody auntie. So I love that figure so much. So just imagine your own auntie trying to solve houses disappearing in your neighborhood. How would that go? It would be chaotic, and that's my favorite character in the book.
Yeah, no, that's hilarious. So I definitely have a favorite part of this book. And Futureland 1 is like science fiction adventure, pretty plainly. By the time we get to 2, you can probably tell by the cover, I'm like doing some creepy stuff. Like it's a little more sci-fi horror mashup. And then the third one is like sci-fi fantasy. I'm just trying to keep something like a fresh element inside the narrative each time. But I really enjoy the horror genre. I think, I don't know, I'm trying to like write my way into that being a component of how my work develops as I go along. And so this is the first book on the deal, and when I was meeting my editor and kind of describing what I wanted to do, she's like on the total other end of the spectrum. So I'm just like trying to put all this creepy stuff in the book, and she's like, oh, I think you're gonna scare the kids. But I got one chapter through. Futureland is this big part, like I said, and it's hard to see from here, but this is a map, and it has 9 different worlds inside it. So if you've ever been to Six Flags and there's like different like little neighborhoods with different themed rides, Futureland is no different. And there's one in the middle in here called the Mines of Tomorrow, and it's basically this like desert cave area with a bunch of mines where you can go on like scavenger hunts and find things. But if you've ever been in a mine or ever even seen a mine on TV, like they're pretty scary, especially when it's dark. So as the mystery progresses and Cam is trying to solve it, everybody around him is acting strange. His parents are acting strange, some of his friends, his uncle, he doesn't really know who he can trust. And his parents send him to the mines to help out with something or to do a task for them. And it's just like the creepiest chapter in the book. It's like the most close to horror. And so I really had a fun time writing it. And I remember sending it in to my editor, and she was like, wow, this is really scary. And I was like, I know, isn't it great? But here's the comic panel for Cam in the mines. He meets like mine revs who are specific to that area, and they kind of hem him up and ask him all these questions. And it's like this little heart-pounding scene where he sort of like tries to do what his parents asked him to do and then get out of there as soon as he can. So this has always been my favorite chapter. It's called Not So Fast.
That's funny that you use that chapter, because that's one of my favorite chapters of the book. There's a lot of black men specifically doing some wild things with middle grades and shit right now.
Yeah.
And yours was, I read the first one, and then I'm about to talk about it, it's not yet. And then I read the second one, which is yours. And I was like, wow, why are they making these kids terrified? Because I was kind of like, hold on, is Cam about to get guys? For sure. I love true stories. So I'm not gonna give what's it called when you ruin it? A spoiler. But I am gonna say that in Plumtree True Stories, there's a collection of different stories about this town called Plumtree. And in one of the stories, you fix your partner. And fixing basically means like you cast like this mystical voodoo ritual on them, where and one of the characters, he had intercourse with another man's wife, and by the time he was done, there were ants coming out of his penis. And there was another incident where a man was having sex with another man's wife, and they got connected. If y'all know the movie Centipede, think that, but instead of mouth, it was penis. So that was one of my favorite chapters and one of my favorite sub-stories within that chapter. It was just like, wow, what if we could really do that? Imagine the damage.
I was wondering, can I say something? Yeah. The eyes, because you were saying like, were you literally like burning the eyes, or you were like gonna burn the eyes, and then you put them in your chest? So I was like, is this part of the fantasy, or is this kind of like real part of the story?
Yeah, so in the world of the story, in this world, the immigration system is set up that you have to give up something that you love. So this character is an artist, and he uses his eyes to paint. So the thing that he loves the most is his eyes, so that's what he has to give up, and they can magically take it away. And that's kind of like a metaphor of kind of what you give up. I'm from Zimbabwe, so you lose a lot when you leave your homeland, and you have to give up a lot to the state, in particular America. So that kind of, the eyes is kind of like a physical manifestation of that thing that you have to kind of give up to assimilate and to come here.
It's a great segue to the next question. So your books are both similar in the ways that, your title story, Drinker from Graveyard Wells, and your entire book addresses and kind of resists capitalism. How does resisting these Western social structures inform your work?
This is probably in everything I write. It's why I get my editors so upset all the time. They're like, we want a family-friendly, simple children's story. I'm like, nah, I can't do it. I think, growing up, so I had a roommate like a few years ago who was from Cleveland, Tennessee. I don't imagine many people have been there, because there's not really a reason to go. But Cleveland, Tennessee is like a small town, just out of Georgia. It's maybe like another 20 minutes north. And we were just talking about like our upbringings. And she was like, yeah, did y'all used to go on field trips in elementary school? And I was like, yeah, we went to a lot of field trips. And she was like, well, where did you go in 5th grade? Like, 5th grade was a big year. And they always like, the coolest field trips then, so where'd you go? And I was like, man, we went a couple different places, but one of the ones that I remember the most was like, we went to the Kingston. We went to Dr. King's childhood home, and just like went to Kingston and we like looked at all of this civil rights stuff. No, then we came back. And she kind of like soured a little bit, like, man, whatever. I'm like, where did you go? She was like, well, we went to a dairy farm. It's like Cleveland, Tennessee, it's just like our cows pretty much. That was like a big thing in our town. And that moment was like, for me, it was like, wow, this whole notion of like people's rights, Black people's rights, and the way that we are subjugated within the current like economic and political system and one of the past that has proliferated, has been a part of my like maturation process since before I even knew that a maturation process was happening. And I think I owe a lot of that to where I'm from. I think the conversations that happen here, even for young kids about society, are sometimes different than what my peers had access to based on where they were. And I'm very thankful for that. And so, you know, for my older kids, I think it's easier. Like, sometimes they're looking for issue books, or they're looking for books that try to explore the world and figure out why it is the way it is. At this age, maybe they aren't there yet, or maybe they don't completely know what they want to say, but I still think that there are ways that we can provide them with questions and provide, you know, younger students with pathways to start forming their own knowledge. And so, you know, there's so many youth activists in the world who are forming their own knowledge. And so, you know, there's so many youth activists in the world. And that's kind of what some of Cam's friends all play a central role. There's a crew of 5 of them, and some of them are really into sports, and some of them are really into dance, and others are like into organizing. And I think it's one way for me to show a kid that might have those leanings, or might even have an interest, like, oh, another kid can do this. And they kind of like how I think. So I want to make sure that something real and substantive is inside these books for them to hold on to.
I love that. You know, for me, Afrosurrealism is about, you know, critiquing these systems in the world. Specifically, you know, that story that I read with the eyes, they have to burn the eyes, and that's the way that the city gets their power. So, you know, that's, you know, immigrant labor. And for a lot of immigrants, you know, you're the right kind of immigrant, you can provide some kind of labor. So think about tech immigrants, and then you're the wrong kind of immigrant if you're not providing, you know, certain types of labor. And I'm thinking a lot about that and how, you know, our value comes from, you know, labor and what we can provide. And those are some of the things that I want to critique in this book.
You did the thing. I hope you did the thing, for sure. So, what or who are some writers who are in your creative or intellectual like genealogy, who are the go-tos, say these who inform my work?
When you may get asked about books, all the books that I've ever read fly out of my mind. But Leslie Arima, she's a brilliant short story collection that uses West African fables, and that's a collection gave me permission to actually start experimenting with horror and fables and fantasy, because I didn't know that Black people would write fantasy. I'd never seen that, and then seeing another person write that and use African fables, I was like, wait, we're allowed to do that? We can do that in a story, so that gave me permission to do that as well. Right now, Mizzy's one big goal. Their work is brilliant. I just love the way they, you know, bring Black spirit into their work. And I think indigenous spirituality has been demonized for so long, so seeing that and seeing a lot of Black writers now tap into that, it's been good.
Yeah, I'm glad you went first, because I came with something. I have like so many of these people that I would say I learned from. But I'm gonna try to go through three for different reasons. The first one is Zora Neale Hurston. I think reading Zora Neale Hurston novel for the first time, I was like, oh, this is like from the South. Like, this is a Southern person writing about the South, giving us a story that is relevant to the South. And that is just like all I ever wanted to do. I got the good fortune to set Futureland in Atlanta, and I was writing for years before this, but this is the first thing I ever wrote about home. So I like put a lot of love into how I thought about portraying the city. But next year I move out of middle grade for a little bit and start my young adult releases. So I have a high school, a young adult like romance novel, basically about two kids that meet in alternative school after they've been expelled from their district schools, and they obviously only have the rest of the year to try to get to know each other before they go back to their districts. And that's set in a city that doesn't exist, but it's an analog to Columbus, Georgia. So 2 hours south of here, right? It's like mostly a military town before being down there, and it's just different than the city. Like most places in our United States are places that are not like this. Most of our area is spread out. Our towns are smaller, and I think that those stories are not like people have not historically looked at them as being sexy or interesting, but that's people's lives. So Zora Neale Hurston really gave me like that permission to be writing about the stuff that we see around here every day. I would also put in Ta-Nehisi Coates for like the journalistic integrity of his work and the research aspect. Yvette can tell you I'm in the chat every other week talking about something that I'm researching. I spend like months and months, sometimes years, trying to research an event or something before I like start writing a fictionalized version of it. It's just like a fun part for me, and I think I learned a lot about how much you can learn when you lean on different sources to find where you're trying to go. And then I would say Audre Lorde as well, just like from a radical thought perspective and trying to push boundaries of how I look at society and how it looks back at me.
I love that, because segues. We love segues. So you said Zora Neale Hurston, of course we know she does a lot of anthropological work.
Yeah.
So there's two moments in the book, and one of them just slipped my mind, so I can remember what the second one is. Okay. There's two moments in your book that really like stood out to me to being anthropological in a way. The one is when Cameron introduced himself to his friends, and they said, "Oh, Cameron, that's her grandfather's name." And it's like it made me pause, like, what does that mean?
Right.
Like, my friends are named Cameron. And it's like, oh, this is in the future. So my friends will be grandparents then.
Yeah.
And so it really like spoke to like the naming practices of Black people and what that looks like in regards to like generational naming.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, where's the second one? No. I lost it. It's okay. No, the second one is that you, if I'm not mistaken, I wanted to look for it before I have a student named Cameron who currently has Futureland.
Okay.
Because he really wanted to. He's like, you know what book my name is? But he has the book right now, so I couldn't find it. But I'm almost positive you kind of make mention to like the Atlanta child murder. I'm almost positive. There's like a slight mention.
Look at you in the segue. No, this, and I'm sorry, but this like falls in perfectly with what you're talking about. The book is in 2048, right? So I'm poking a lot of fun at like the time we live in now and like what it might be like in another, little while here. But I think you're spot on with the naming thing, and also Cam's friends are named Yusuf, Rich, or his name is Christopher Richardson, but they call him Rich, Angel, and Earl, and which are also grandparents' names potentially, right? How you look at them. But the biggest win of this book, like in the pre-release stage, was probably when they gave me permission to set it in Atlanta. I got two pieces of news in the same week as we were developing the plot. It was like, okay, we want to add something about kids going missing, and you need to put it in Atlanta. And anybody who's from here knows, like immediately their minds go to one place, which is the Atlanta child murders from the late 70s and early 80s. And I said, not only do I get a chance to write about home, I get a chance to like say something important. This was also during the same period of time where I was drafting where the, Keisha Lance's Bible had reopened the case officially. So it just felt like such a gift. And Yusuf, Angel, Rich, and Earl are names of kids that went missing. So I'm like always trying to find ways to not only do it like on a narrative level, but to also give something back to people who are investing any of their time in picking up a story of mine. Like, it's not really about me and only me. There's so much of this legacy and heritage that has come down to this moment for me to be able to write this, that I think I just seek out ways that I can connect people with other things, because that's what I love about it.
So while you connect us to more recent histories, events, in your novel, you kind of hinted, and this is something I'm going to ask you in general, but in Ngugi wa Thiong'o, in Something Torn and New, he has a concept called remembering, re-memory, and this is effort to return to the past and getting these stories and these histories that we've had and bring to the present so that we can return to pre-colonial epistemologies and ontologies. And in your book, you talk about this plenty. So you talk about indigenous scientific literacies and just indigenous ways of knowing and being. And in one of your books specifically, you talk about, one of the stories you talk about remembering. But stories, it might have been even the story you read today. But what does it mean to you to connect these African paths with our current diaspora present?
Oh, this is a big yeah, I think in the story, I forget what it's called now. The time travel story.
Definitely give us a mind.
Yeah. And in that story, the concept is that it's an East African way of conceptualizing time. In that time moves backwards and not forward. So when we age, we're going towards the past, because we're all going to die, we're all going to become ancestors. So when you age, you're moving towards your past and future. And I just thought that was really interesting to kind of reframe time in that way, in that it's not linear, it's not going forward, it's going backwards. And what can we, take from the past? What can we learn from the ancestors and the character who goes through time travel? She uses this conceptualization of time to go back to an ancestor who's been forgotten and to remember her in that way. I think that's important. I think a lot of our culture and our history has been demonized, has been erased. So that was a way for me to say, we need to, find a way to preserve the knowledge that we still do have in the present.
And to speak to this concept, so Zamani is this idea in Kenya of this kind of limitless past, where as long as you're in the memory of either collective or individual memory, then you're still alive. But the second that you are forgotten, you experience like this true death. In this story, one of the character's ancestors did experience the true death. She was written out of history. She goes back in time, and she writes the story of what she sees. So she's a witness to this incident. And she comes back, and all of a sudden, her ancestor is now named, like schools are named after her, hospitals are named after her, etc. So a very beautiful moment for sure. And I think the wildest thing about just both your books in general, I met them in Voodoo. So I met them last summer before both their books were released. So they were talking about their books, and I can't wait to read them. I'm a PhD student, so I wrote a essay about like hip hop futurism and this idea that hip hop artists like Missy Elliott, Busta Rhymes, etc., are giving us permission to engage in speculative thoughts in their music videos. And then I talk about Zamani in that paper. So I'm doing like all this research into African conceptions of time, and I go and read your story, and I'm like, I'll text her immediately, like, we're here. So y'all are definitely doing the work. So thank you for doing the work, because we definitely need it. Great question. So what book made you want to write, and why? Or what made you want to write?
Yeah, it was the poem Annabelle Lee by Edgar Allan Poe. We were reading this in 4th grade. I don't know why. Every time I tell this story, I feel kind of weird because I realize how strange it is. We was reading that at 9, but it was in our textbook, and knowing me, maybe I was reading it, maybe we weren't reading it. But either way, I came across it, and I had a really sweet 4th grade teacher. Her name was Ms. Green, and I asked her like the poem. It was just so emotional. If you're familiar with Edgar Allan Poe, as almost like a autobiographical speaker in the poem, he was talking about a woman that you loved that is no longer with us. So I'm reading this poem, and it's like, so, I don't know what it means fully, but I can tell that this person is really sad. It's a really emotional poem, and it was like the first thing that I read that I ever felt. So I asked Ms. Green, like, how did this poem get in our textbook? She was like, oh, like, they print a bunch of textbooks and they put stories in there. And all my friends here will know that that's not how my brain works. I'm like, no. When it was just a thought and an idea, how did it get from there into this book specifically? And so she explained, like, oh, this person was a writer when he was alive. People liked his work, so they decided to print it. He died, they kept printing it. And people think it's so good that they put it in books so people like you can read it and learn from it. And it just blew my mind. I was like, there's a job where I can write down how I feel and get paid for it. She ain't telling me to broke me down. I can write down how I feel and get paid. Like, yeah. And I was like, and 100 years after I'm gone, in a place where, I maybe never even visited and people don't know me, there's a chance that my voice can still be resounding in some kind of way. It's like, yeah, I know what I want to do. So it was them. That's good.
Thank you, Ms. Green.
Shout out, Ms. Green.
For me, it was the children's author, Yvette Ndlovu. She's not really popular in America, but she is in former British colonies like Zimbabwe, where I'm from. And in those stories, there's one called like the wishing chair, where they like take this chair and they can fly to any world they go. There's also like detective stories, like the famous five, so these 5 children like solving mysteries, and I was like, oh, this is so cool. But then reading those stories, they're all set in England, and so I didn't think stories could be about Africans, could be about Black people. So when I was writing my own stories, I was writing about snow. There's no snow in Zimbabwe. The first time that I saw snow was when I came to America, so I was writing about snow. I was writing about these things in England that I never experienced because I thought that's the only white people allowed to be in stories. And so when I discovered Black writers like Leslie Garima, like Medio Gorba, I was like, oh wait, Black people can be in books, they can be in stories, and again that gave me permission to, now write that fantastic stuff but featuring Black characters. And that's why we need more Black middle grade and YA books. So young kids can know that we can be in stories, we can be, in futuristic parks, we can be witches, we can have dragons, that.
Yeah. Actually, so this is a great question. What do we have coming up, guys? What's next?
I knew you was gonna do this. I'll go with the tangible stuff. Futureland 2, also known as the Nightmare Hour, is out this November. So, and this is in paperback. So, if you like paperback version of this, and the hardback version of Futureland 2 out on the same day, November 7th. Then August of next year, my young adult romance novel. It's called Something Like Right. Something Like Right will be out August next year. There may be something else in between those two, but as of right now, those are the 2 newest things that we know are happening when I say they're happening.
Love to make this.
I'm working on I love your excitement, on an epic fantasy novel that's inspired by a pre-colonial Southern African kingdom. So back home we have these stone ruins of a stone city called the Great Zimbabwe, and that's where my country's name comes from. So Zimbabwe means Palace of Stone or Great House of Stone. So there are all these ruins around the country of these stone cities. And I've never seen them in like a medieval fantasy, and I was like, we have all this great history, that should be books. I'm tired of the European medieval castles and all that. We can have our own stuff. So it's an epic fantasy set in an imagined stone city with 3 magical Black girls taking on the gods and the patriarchy. So there's dragons, there's different Southern African mythological creatures, and vengeful and petty gods.
Love that. All right. Does anyone from the audience have any questions they would like to ask?
did we ever actually define Afro-speculation?
No, I guess we did not actually define Afro-speculation.
Because I think I know, but just kind of, I wanted to see how you guys define it at least.
So honestly, it was just a catchy title. But if we could do it there, Afro-speculation, I guess, is the act of writing Black speculative fiction across the diaspora. If I was to give a very simple definition off the top of my head, it's a verb.
You just coined the term. Put that in the dissertation.
We all should bear witness at this moment.
You want to add a definition? Afro-speculation, what does it mean to you to speculate as an Afro-diasporic person?
So when they talk about like speculative fiction in general, like Western speculative fiction, usually what we get is some version of writers, thinkers, storytellers considering the worlds that might be. So how our world might be different, or how in the future there will be a different world, or something of that nature. And I think one aspect that I won't say it's absent from speculative fiction in general, but that I think is particularly nuanced in Afro speculation is like considering the worlds that already have been, like the whole non-linear time aspect, all of our connections to the spiritual side of things, to ancestry, and also just, I think, a yearning from people that have been subjugated to have a speculation about the way that the world could have been different. I think that's like not something that we get as often from non-Black speculative writers.
Yeah, I think like specifically for Zimbabwe, like the way that we think through things is through speculation. So for example, Robert Mugabe was the dictator of my country for a long time, and I didn't believe that that man could die, and everybody didn't believe. We thought he was immortal, and that's just the myth that your president is immortal because you were born, he was president, you were president.
Man was holding on.
Yeah.
He was holding on.
Exactly. And then I have a story in here with an immortal leader who runs an island, and he's pretty much a skeleton. Everybody else ages and dies, but he stays, president forever. And that's kind of a way to explore what does it mean to grow up under, a dictatorship, under somebody with absolute power. It feels like this person is larger than life, that they're gods, that they're immortal, basically. So that's kind of like the stories that we grow up with. Is how do you understand the world around you? You speculate about it. And even think of a lot of West African myths are about these white ghost-like figures who snatch people in the night, and think about what that is. What is that in the real world? It's when the white people were snatching people. But then there's these myths about these figures that come in the night and snatch people, and they're ghosts, and they're weird, and they're pale skin, and it's used in speculation to understand, real things in the real world.
Yeah, the question is that.
Yeah, I wanted to address her earlier point about her upcoming book, about it being about like a medieval era in Zimbabwe. Mm-hmm. How do you think books like yours, or if other people dive into what was happening on the continent or around Black people during that time, how would that impact future generations? Because right now, all we have are like millions of King Arthur stories and Game of Thrones and Lord of the Rings. All of our fantasy is based on European history, and it reinforces a Eurocentric beginning of time, or, Greco-Roman, this is where civilization started. So how do you think it'll impact future generations growing up with representation of African historical, we were actually doing things, it is written, and maybe adaptations of media in that way?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I think it's about cultivating imagination. So going back to, the stories that I read with these British children's authors, And the stories I was writing were filled with snow, even though I'd never seen snow. They had white people that were set in England. And that affected my imagination. I could only imagine white people in England as the only thing you can write about. So seeing yourself in a book allows you to imagine yourself in that and to also imagine a different world. You know, I often say that I think of people like Harriet Tubman and Nelson Mandela as Afrofuturists because they could imagine a different future, you know, in a world where, you know, black people are not human, black people are not free, they could imagine something different and they made that happen. So it starts with imagination and then it becomes action in the real world.
That's a good point, because I was watching, or was I watching a documentary or reading an article? One of the two, ingesting something, and they were talking about Martin Delaney as an Afrofuturist writer. And if you don't know who Martin Delaney is, he writes about, Marcus Garvey and his Pan-African movement, like going back to Africa, he's in that era. And that's like the idea of seeing like ourselves in the future and beyond, and how early writers didn't have the luxury of witches and werewolves, etc., because they were still trying to see themselves as human. So that's a good way to like just reconceptualize what Afrofuturism looks like. Love that. Well, love talking about y'all books today. If you want a copy of Drinking from Graveyard Wells or Futureland, you can purchase one in the bookstore for those who are in person today. For those who are on TikTok, or are you on TikTok, Instagram?
Yeah.
For those who are on the Twitterverse or the internet, you can go to bookshop.org where 44th and 3rd has a page. You can also order those books if you still want to support a Black-owned, HBC-owned bookstore. Thank y'all for tuning in. Thank y'all for coming. Have a great day.
Now we can